W5.
I love you.
I remember her being little and sassy and very full of life.
The long fight to save a child in crisis.
The whole city was falling apart. I mean, it was just coming down around us.
As years of obstacles leave her future in jeopardy.
This family has every right to be reunited in Canada.
We have to let due process unfold as it will.
How in the world is this happening in 2020? How is this happening to a child?
CTV's W5 with Avery Haines, Sandy Ronaldo, and Lisa Laflamme. Here is Avery Haines.
Hello, and thanks for joining us. What would you do for a child you loved? Well, for the past decade, 2 Canadians have gone to extraordinary lengths in a quest to adopt a little girl from an impoverished country and bring her to Canada. They have endured a string of practically unimaginable obstacles, a natural disaster, international political turmoil, and the seeming indifference of the Canadian government. But they've never wavered in their commitment to bring Widlene home. This is a slice of paradise, the gorgeous beaches and palm trees of the Dominican Republic, beckoning winter-weary Canadians. It was here in 2007 that Crystal Earle met a little girl named Widlene, who stole her heart. But that first meeting wasn't on some sun-drenched beach. Instead, it was a place few tourists ever go. A sprawling, festering garbage dump on the outskirts of the resort town of Puerto Plata. This is where your life changed enormously.
Yeah. Yeah, this is where I met Widlene's mom. To me, it was just a lady that I was chatting with for a minute who had a toddler. I remember thinking she was a really cute kid.
At the time, Crystal and her husband Vaden had dedicated their lives to global humanitarian work. One of their projects was to bring Canadian students to the Dominican Republic to build homes. As part of the mission, they visited this garbage dump to witness firsthand how Haitians were earning a meager living. Despite her grim reality, Widlene had a spark.
I remember her being little and sassy and very full of life. And she was tiny. Oh my goodness, she was so tiny. And I remember her mom, and I actually have some pictures of her holding her mom's hand. I think she's like doing laundry in a bucket with her mom when she was little.
She was just a wild kid, like just really outgoing, really charismatic. And at that age, when you see someone who's so charismatic, it just kind of grips you. Wasn't really a kid person, but this one just seemed to grab a hold of my heartstrings.
Vaden and Crystal's humanitarian work kept bringing them back to the dump. Each time they would search out little Widlene.
Before we knew it, every day we were out either in the garbage dump or in the community next to the garbage dump doing a project. All the kids would run out, and this little kid was the one that was running out ahead of them all. So we really bonded with her.
They checked in on Widlene and her mother, Mary Therese, every chance they got. And then one day, 2 years after meeting Widlene, they learned that Mary Therese had died.
When I found out that her mother had passed away, I went back to the village. I was walking around with a picture of Widlene and I, actually, and talking to people and saying, do you know where this little girl is? And I found a gentleman that I worked with at the garbage dump, and he took me to see her grandma.
Widlene's grandmother simply did not have the means to care for another child. And so she made a desperate request.
Widlene's grandma asked us to take her full time.
Don't forget, our life message has been, giving up something to help someone around the world, someone who's less fortunate. We've been hammering that message at home to teenagers and young adults for already, by that point, a decade.
Knowing Widlene's future was in peril, Vaden and Crystal made a life-changing decision and agreed to adopt Widlene. When you started this process of trying to adopt, you figured it was going to be at most a couple of years, and then you'd be able to bring Widlene to Canada.
Yeah, I mean, the time frame we were given was 12 weeks, 7 to 12. We didn't think it was going to be done in 12 weeks, but certainly we didn't think it would be even a year either.
Vaden and Crystal had already fallen madly in love with a little girl from the dump, and the couple of 2 became a family of 3.
You got it. Go for it.
Giving Widlene a life that most Canadian children would take for granted.
Here we go. Give us a twirl. Give us a twirl. Woo!
Crystal and Vaden showered Widlene with love. And it didn't take long before she was calling them Mom and Dad.
Happy birthday, dear Daddy. Happy birthday to you. I love you.
You know, I didn't have those beginning years with her. I don't have memories of her first steps or her first words. I remember the first time that she grabbed my hand. We're in the car. She reached over and just started holding my hand a couple days after she first came to live with us. I remember the first time she called me Mom.
With a little girl's life hanging in the balance, Crystal and Vaden put their lives on hold to wait for the paperwork so they could bring Widlene to Canada. In the meantime, they set up a home in the Dominican Republic, making sure that at least one of them was always in the country to take care of Widlene.
We were commuting back and forth. I would do 2 weeks in Dominican Republic while Crystal was in Canada, and then we just switch.
The bureaucracy of foreign adoptions moves slowly, and Widlene's circumstances were especially tricky. Her mother was dead, her father was never in her life, and while Widlene was born in the Dominican Republic, her parents were from Haiti. In December of 2009, Vaden and Crystal made a trip to the Haitian capital to process the necessary paperwork.
We signed our final adoption papers in Port-au-Prince. It was a nightmare of just running from office to office. You got to bring it here and notarize it there, and this person has to verify it, and the judge has to stamp it. It was just a crazy, crazy process.
When this picture was taken, Crystal and Vaden assumed it would be their last Christmas in the DR, that they would be home in Canada with Widlene early in the new year. And then, less than 1 month after submitting the paperwork in Haiti and being granted approval to adopt Widlene, disaster struck. Tuesday, January 12th, 2010. A 7.0 magnitude earthquake reduced Port-au-Prince to ruins.
The water's coming to an end.
As many as 300,000 people were killed in the quake. The poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere was the least prepared to weather such a blow. 250,000 homes were destroyed, as were tens of thousands of businesses and government buildings. The capital, Port-au-Prince, was among the hardest hit. This is Port-au-Prince today, 10 years after one of the most devastating earthquakes in modern history. Now, despite the bustling markets, this city has not recovered. There's widespread civil unrest, food shortages, rampant crime, and kidnappings. Now, Vaden Earle came here to the capital just days after the earthquake. He was part of a humanitarian rescue mission. And it was here in 2010 that he discovered that his attempts to adopt Widlene had literally been reduced to rubble.
So I got on a plane and took a team of relief workers almost immediately to the earthquake site. We were going to help because we had also been sponsoring an orphanage there for a number of years, and the whole city was falling apart. I mean, it was just coming down around us. There were still aftershocks that were knocking buildings down while we're standing around.
Among the destroyed buildings was the one where Widlene's adoption papers were being processed.
Because of the time that the earthquake happened, people were still in office buildings and everything, and the judge, everybody was killed in it, and everything was buried.
My next thought was, right, there's always records. There's a computerized something somewhere. Not in Haiti, you sign a piece of paper, it's a piece of paper. And if you can't find it, you can't prove it.
So while the world is mourning the loss of hundreds of thousands of people, you too are, but you're also realizing your dreams
It's gone.
are at the bottom of a pile of rubble.
It's buried.
Coming up,
I've never seen this set of circumstances in an impossible adoption.
hopes of a fast adoption crushed.
We literally had to start from ground zero. It was almost impossible.
When W5 continues.
The devastating Haiti earthquake in 2010 left a country in ruins. And for a Canadian couple, Vaden and Crystal Earle, it crushed their dreams of adopting a little girl named Widlene and bringing her to Canada.
We lost all ability to be able to complete anything in the process that we'd started.
And then another blow. All international adoptions out of Haiti were halted over fears of child trafficking.
We literally had to start from ground zero and not even living in our own country. So it was almost impossible.
It's kind of like Lemony Snicket's series of unfortunate events because the things that happened became so surreal.
Intercountry adoptions are very difficult at the best of times.
Andrea Basten is a BC-based adoption advocate who's been working on Widlene's file since 2017.
In the case of Widlene, I've never seen this set of circumstances in an impossible adoption.
And this impossible situation didn't get any easier when the adoption ban was eventually lifted. To start the process again, Vaden and Crystal were told they'd have to surrender Widlene to an orphanage in Haiti for months or even years, without any guarantee that an adoption would ever be granted.
What would anybody do in that situation? You're going to protect your child. Widlene had had enough trauma in her life. I wasn't going to be putting her in an orphanage somewhere, in a country that she no longer really even spoke the language.
What's your next move to get Widlene home?
We basically said, we're going to have to raise Widlene here
In the Dominican Republic.
Stay here and build a life here until she's 18 and we could sponsor her to go to Canada as an adult. So for the first year and a half, maybe, we just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Which is a nightmare. You know what? Who could survive that, right?
In fact, Crystal and Vaden couldn't survive it. In 2011, after 16 years together, the couple split up. The stress of living in two places had taken its toll, but they remained united in their quest to adopt Widlene and bring her to Canada. In 2017, Crystal set up a company that takes upcycled materials from Dominican dumps and turns them into sandals and purses, sold online and in Canada. Now, with her business based in both countries, her time spent with Widlene in the DR doesn't come at the expense of her career. But other challenges remain.
Co-parenting after a separation is difficult at the best of times. How are you guys making this work?
There's a lot of give and take, and you have to sometimes swallow your frustrations or resentments around things, and you just have to make it work.
Every 2 weeks, you're flying back and forth, right?
So we often fly in and out on the same day, as much as possible, totally actually for logistics.
The logistics of splitting parenting duties by living 2 weeks out of every month in a different country are daunting. But after a decade, Vaden and Crystal have developed an admirable routine, right down to a car they often share.
We try to fly in and out of the same airport, and we leave the car in the parking lot for each other.
They were living a peaceful, if disjointed life. But in 2013, they suffered another crippling setback. This time not because of a natural disaster, but because of a political crisis.
After the earthquake in Haiti, they made a decision, you know what, it's okay. We're gonna live in DR. When she's 18, she can apply for a study permit, maybe we can go to university, but let's just live a lovely, happy life in DR. But then, the DR government started deporting Haitians.
Deporting Haitians. Haiti and the DR may be two halves of the same island, but the relationship between the two countries is hostile. In what has been described as an attempt to rid the DR of Haitians, the Dominican Constitutional Court revoked the citizenship of anyone who couldn't prove that their ancestors had come to the country legally, retroactive to 1929. It left thousands, including Widlene, stateless, no longer a citizen of any country.
Being stateless in a lot of countries might mean not having a passport or access to basic human rights, education, a job, health care, the basic stuff, you know, the important stuff. But here, they don't want you on their soil if you're stateless, or more accurately, if you're Haitian.
Deportation sweeps began in 2015 and continue to this day.
with school buses patrolling the streets of the DR, rounding up stateless people, including children, and dumping them at the border in Haiti, where many, like Widlene, have no family and can't even speak the language, Creole.
So every time Widlene steps out the door, we've got to look and make sure these deportation forces aren't around, because we've watched people get violently deported. And when I say violently, I mean beaten down and thrown into a cage on the back of a bus.
The new rules drew international condemnation. Amnesty International declared, with the stroke of a pen, authorities in the Dominican Republic have effectively wiped 4 generations of Dominicans off the map. Legal scholars have denounced the deportations as a crime against humanity. This man, Jose Ricardo Taveras Blanco, the former director of migration for the Dominican Republic, was responsible for implementing the court ruling.
Entre nosotros,
being born in Dominican Republic doesn't give you the nationality.
no da la nacionalidad dominicana.
We have 2 cultures totally opposed, and also too little territory for too much people.
This law has been denounced by the international community. Human rights activists have said that it is a violation of human rights, that it's racist, that it's xenophobic, that it's essentially ethnic cleansing. How do you respond to that?
Of course, because to justify the Dominican laws, we are sold as a racist country. And that's absolutely wrong. Each state has the right to define its politics in migration law.
We're investigating the case of one little girl who was born in the Dominican Republic, who now lives in fear that one of your deportation buses is going to pick her up, take her away from her Canadian mom and dad, and dump her at the border in Haiti.
Entiendo.
From my point of view, she has nothing to fear.
Nothing to fear? Well, don't tell that to Widlene, who is no longer the toddler who was rescued from the dump a decade ago. She is now on her way to becoming a young woman, 14 years old. Last December, Vaden was driving Widlene to school when they came across a deportation bus looking for people of Haitian descent like Widlene.
We're in trouble. I realized it, but when I realized it, it was too late.
We both freaked out and we didn't know what to do.
We've got this soldier, he's dressed in his fatigues, he's carrying a big old M16. He pointed that gun right at Widlene. I said, screw it, floored it. On the shoulder, oncoming traffic, motorcycles going into the trees everywhere, people diving at my way, I'm going 120 miles an hour.
I was screaming and I was like, oh, this is over, and they're gonna take me away from my family.
I've gotten so much speed now that I realize they're not gonna catch me. Then I ditched a car and walked home.
Your whole life has been consumed for the past decade of protecting this little girl, and you came this close to not protecting her.
Yeah, and that keeps me up at night right now. She's done nothing wrong. She was born in this country. She's got as much right to this country as anybody else.
Illegal and at risk in the DR, no home in Haiti, and so far at least unable to be adopted and brought to Canada. The bulk of Widlene's life has been spent in survival mode.
How in the world is this happening in 2020? How is this happening to a child?
Coming up,
It's this nightmare for Widlene.
years of setbacks take their toll
Why is Widlene's entrance to Canada such a big deal?
when W5 continues. CTV's W5. Here is Avery Haines.
Welcome back. From natural disasters to political upheaval, Crystal and Vaden Earle have faced a decade of challenges in their quest to adopt a little girl named Widlene. And as you're about to see, the Canadian government certainly hasn't been much help.
The sunny beaches of the Dominican Republic are a world away from those in Kingsville, Ontario, especially in the winter. But here in Canada's self-proclaimed most southern town, there's a home all ready for Widlene Earle, who's been waiting more than 10 years to come and live in Canada.
Hi, Luther. Can you give me kisses?
You got kisses for sister? Oh, good kisses.
For 2 weeks every month, while her mother Crystal is in the DR, Vaden, his partner Nikki, and their 1-year-old son Luther live here and stay in touch with Widlene over Skype.
Say bye. Bye, sis.
Bye. Oh,
Bye,
you got a kiss for her? One kiss for her?
Love
All right, love you too. Kisses.
Good.
Oh, yeah.
When Nikki first met Vaden in the DR in 2013, she only knew he was a single dad caring for Widlene.
My respect for Vaden as a person shot through the roof because at that point in time, he had made the decision to walk away from everything in Canada to keep a commitment that he made to Widlene.
What is the relationship like between Vaden and Widlene?
It's exactly the picture-perfect example of what a father-daughter relationship should be. And I get to watch it front row. And it's really special.
Nikki has essentially become Widlene's stepmom, and here in the family's home in Kingsville, Widlene has a room waiting for her, a closet full of clothes, a photo wall of memories, even still wrapped presents from Christmases past.
There's a bedroom waiting for Widlene.
It's the quote-unquote master bedroom of the house. Her closet's full of clothes. You know, we bought her a down jacket because we don't want her to freeze. It's not going to fit her anymore.
And Widlene is not here, but she's everywhere. Every wall has got photos of Widlene and your family.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because we know that not every day we can be by her side, but she's never gone. She's never away from us. I think about her every minute of every day.
How difficult is it living this kind of split life where there's almost this commuting between Canada and the Dominican Republic so that somebody is always there with Widlene?
We are exhausted, just physically exhausted from going back and forth.
Which book do you want to read? This one?
Oh, you like this one?
And then you add a baby into the mix. He's been on 58 flights. He's 13 months old.
She handed Bear the microphone. She counted up to 4.
You're not. Here.
And the stress of their dual life never fades, even when all four are reunited every 2 weeks here in the DR.
So it's not pina coladas and white sand. It isn't for us. It's this nightmare for Widlene.
Widlene feels like a prisoner in paradise.
You always think, oh, since you were born here, you are like safe, but no.
And some pretty bad things could happen to you.
But sometimes I don't try to think about it because I don't want to like keep thinking about it and ruin my day. So I try not to think about it.
Is that hard though when you're with other friends at school who can freely walk around everywhere and not have that in the back of your head? That you're holding on to this fear that you could be stopped by the police?
Yeah, it's really hard because like they're safe, and so it's hard.
Okay, do you have any plans yet for the weekend?
I was waiting for you to see if you have plans for me.
Okay. Why do you want
For the past decade, Crystal Earle has been raising Widlene while still living in Canada half of the time.
Okay.
But the interesting and challenging dynamic of parenting from thousands of miles away is I'm trying to figure out how to stay, keep a consistent, stable space for her.
Don't forget that we have the wedding on Sunday too, okay? So that's going to be, we'll be leaving the house at around 1:30-ish.
I think I already know what I'm going to wear.
Okay, awesome.
While they've all long ago learned to adjust to this dual existence, they live in a constant state of fear now that Widlene is technically illegal in the DR. That fear inspired Vaden to take his plight directly to the Canadian people.
We launched a campaign, and we called the Bring Widlene Home campaign. Thank you again so much. We're going to get this done. We're going to bring Widlene home.
An online campaign launched in 2017, with Vaden doing daily Facebook Live updates to thousands of followers, demanding the Canadian government step in and, on humanitarian grounds, allow Widlene to come to Canada.
Why is Widlene's entrance to Canada such a big deal?
It spread like wildfire, and it was overwhelming and really humbling.
In 3 months of the campaign, 750,000 emails were sent to Ottawa. 750,000. We had no idea it was going to blow up like that.
And as the online campaign gained steam, Vaden made a personal pact with Widlene.
2017, we launched a campaign, and Nikki and I are both avid hockey fans. So we've kind of roped Widlene into watching some hockey with us, and it was the playoffs. We're watching, and she goes, "Do you have to have a beard to play hockey? Is that the rule?" So we explained the playoff beard. You know, when the playoffs start, they grow it until they either are eliminated or they win the Stanley Cup. Widlene said, "You should grow a playoff beard, so don't shave it until I get my visa to come to Canada." I don't necessarily like beards, but I will refuse to shave this until Widlene gets her admittance to Canada. Because to me, it's a symbol of a promise that I made to Widlene.
We're going to keep pushing, buddy. We're going to get your daughter home.
The Bring Widlene Home campaign went viral as Canadians from coast to coast became an army of Widlene supporters.
Has no human rights right now. She's a stateless little girl in Dominican trying to come to Canada.
I will look into the case.
Mr. Trudeau, can you
I will follow up on that, yes.
You will? Like that.
Taking their campaign directly to the Prime Minister at a series of public events to convince the government to grant Widlene a temporary resident permit. It's known as a TRP, a way to get into the country without the necessary documents on humanitarian grounds.
Thank you.
Mr. Trudeau.
Hi there.
Widlene Earle, you've heard of her. We have some information for you.
Yes, I
want to know you're dedicated to helping her out.
We're looking into it right now. My office is engaged with it.
Even Vaden made a personal plea.
I show up at the Winona Peach Festival, and there's Trudeau.
What a pleasure to see you. Thank you very much. I heard you guys just filled out some papers in Dominican Republic.
No, it's in Ottawa.
On that side, she has the Ottawa stuff too, but there's also stuff going on the Dominican side, right?
And it's been shipped to Ottawa.
Good. Excellent. We're keeping our eye on it.
Appreciate your work. And I believe it.
You got people activated across the country.
The whole country's behind us.
Oh yeah, no, you know that. And we're working really hard with you guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're getting done.
And before long, Widlene's case was repeatedly raised in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, this government must make a stronger effort in bringing Widlene Alexis Earle home to Canada.
Their story has captured the hearts of many Canadians who have written letters in support of
Dean Allison is a Conservative MP from the Niagara region.
She's sort of fallen through the cracks. You look at this young girl who is stuck in statelessness, essentially, and yet you've got people from all walks of life, all different political parties, all kinds of stripes that are very concerned and would love to see her be able to come home.
Can you give me a sense of why this has taken so long, why this little girl is not in Canada?
It's very complicated, and really what we need is somebody in the government to say this is something that we believe strongly in, and we're prepared to do it as we have done in other cases. And I think that compassion is required in order to see her to be able to come to Canada.
But so far, that compassion hasn't been found. Twice, Widlene's application for a temporary resident permit has been denied, once in 2017 and then again in 2019. The rejection letters were filled with factual errors, including there's no evidence of any efforts made by Mr. and Mrs. Earle to formalize the adoption. There's no evidence that the parents or living family of Widlene have consented to an adoption. And there's no evidence that the biological mother is deceased.
And the rejection letter had these nonsense reasons that just didn't make any sense. These were all clerical, like we don't have proof that Widlene's mother died. So we go back. Not only is that death certificate in the file, but we got a receipt that they received it.
Have you ever wondered, Vaden, if your approach, this attacking of the Canadian government, the protests from coast to coast, have affected that will of the Canadian government to bring Widlene home?
It shouldn't. Ethically, it shouldn't. And legally, it shouldn't. because an application is an application.
Andrea Basten is an adoption advocate who's been working on the appeal of Widlene's immigration case for the past 2.5 years.
If Vaden's approach has been detrimental to bringing his daughter into Canada, then I would like all the adults in the room to take a big breath, because sometimes the person sitting across from you ruffles your feathers. That doesn't matter. There's still a kid in the corner who is suffering, who is in jeopardy.
After years of setbacks, the rejections have shaken Crystal's belief that her dream to bring Widlene to Canada will ever come true.
You get so used to disappointment that you start to just navigate your life around disappointment. I want to say that I'm holding out hope because the part of me that is always eternally optimistic would want to, but I've kind of lost faith in the system that we'd hoped it would come through.
I can't imagine the set of circumstances. Aid workers in another country, maternal death, such extreme poverty, an earthquake, lack of paperwork, deportation, internal policies from 3 different countries. I mean, this is a perfect storm of chaos. This family has every right, every legal right to be reunited in Canada.
Oh, good girlie. Good girlie.
Back in the house in Kingsville, Vaden's parents, Donna and Garth, couldn't agree more.
I just don't understand, why this is happening, why the government don't go ahead and, bring her home. She's only a child, right? When so many can come into Canada, and yet she can't come in, right? So it's really, really hard. It breaks my heart. I burst out crying. I cry a lot.
This is the only photo they have with Widlene. Because of finances and health issues, they've only been able to travel to the DR once to meet her when she was 4 years old.
She's in there.
She's in your heart.
Yes. Yeah. I just long for the day when she comes in, so I can give her lots of hugs, lots of love, which I will do soon.
Coming up.
Everything we had worked towards was gone.
Losing faith in the system.
I have a strong disappointment in my own government.
When W5 continues.
It's February 2020, and Vaden is returning to the place where his dreams of adopting Widlene and bringing her to Canada suffered the first devastating setback in 2010. The earthquake in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, that destroyed so many lives also buried the paperwork and the caseworker needed to secure her adoption. A decade may have passed, but not much has improved. In many ways, this city is in worse shape than ever. Riots and protests are rampant. Criminal gangs have seized control over some areas, and there's an overwhelming sense of despair and lawlessness. There are some signs of reconstruction, to be sure. New buildings continue to go up, especially in parts of the city core. But mostly, projects simply seem to have been abandoned. This is a city that shows few signs of recovery.
As Haiti recognizes the 10-year anniversary of that horrible earthquake, it's a 10-year anniversary of the death of a dream for you.
Yeah, maybe 2 days after the quake, I mustered up the nerve to go back to the building where I signed the paperwork, knowing that that's where all of our documents were housed, all of the proof. It looked like this. It looked like what we see around us. It was just a 3-story building had come down to where it was at chest height, and I knew at that point that everything we had worked towards was gone.
As you look at rubble like this, at the bottom of that is paperwork that could have made a huge difference in your life 10 years ago.
It's hard to look at this. This is what I saw when I came. It's all. Yeah, we lost everything. We lost absolutely everything.
And then, less than 24 hours after arriving in Haiti, the first cause for hope in nearly a decade. A federal court judge back in Canada has issued a breathtaking ruling in Widlene's favor. The judge condemned the previous decision, calling it incoherent, profoundly inconsistent, and saying it almost entirely ignored Widlene's personal circumstances. The judge describes the case as exceptional and writes, "The time has assuredly come for someone to take a holistic and full-fledged humanitarian and compassionate review focused on Widlene's circumstances and needs."
What's the first thing you did once you read that judgment?
You mean after I picked myself up off the floor? I found some Kleenex. I'm too tough to cry, but you know, this time was an exception. I sent a text to Widlene. I said, "Are you able to talk?" And Nikki called me from the dinner table, and they're sitting there eating their dinner. And I just said, "Yeah, we won in court." And just a look. I've been waiting 10 years to see that look on Widlene's face. 10 years to see that look on her face. Finally, something went right. Finally.
Back in Toronto, Crystal has just received the news, too.
I feel excited, but yet I don't know what to expect because there have been moments all along this case when I thought that this was that things were going to happen quickly, and I no longer put any stake in timelines.
With the judge's scathing ruling, Widlene's case is being sent back to an immigration case officer for a final decision. And that could take months or even years. Or the federal immigration minister could simply issue a temporary resident permit on humanitarian grounds, something adoption advocate Andrea Basten believes should have happened a long time ago.
The immigration minister, I think, should have intervened, should have issued a temporary resident permit so that Widlene could have had access to Canada.
For nearly 3 years, the previous immigration minister, Ahmed Hussein, refused to do so. But in November of 2019, a new immigration minister was appointed.
Mr. Marco E.L. Mendicino, Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Former federal prosecutor Marco Mendicino. Vaden and Nikki are in Toronto, a month after the federal court ruled in Widlene's favor. They've still heard nothing about next steps from the immigration department. Today, the immigration minister is giving a speech at this hotel. Vaden is hoping to make a personal plea. When he shows up at a reception for the minister, he doesn't get a warm welcome.
Can I talk to you?
You can talk to me, yeah.
Hi. This is a closed. This is not for media. Can I help you?
I'm not media.
Oh.
No, I'm just here to say hi to Marco.
So this is not open for cameras.
Okay, I'll just stay here.
No, but thank you. It's time to leave.
Okay. I won't come in the room. Okay, but I'm not going to leave either.
The doors are closed and hotel security is called.
If in fact the minister doesn't want to speak with you, then yes, we will have to ask you to leave the property.
That should be
so
interesting.
we'll wait on that.
All right.
With Widlene watching from the Dominican via FaceTime, it's a standoff. Vaden knows there's only one way out of that room, and he's not budging. Eventually, someone from the immigration department emerges, but it's not the minister.
He's going to talk to me, isn't he?
You're Mr. Earle.
Yes, I am.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Earle.
What's your name again?
Andre. I'm sorry. I'm Andre with Communications.
You don't have a card on you, do you?
I do.
Okay.
And Andre says there's a plan.
So follow me, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Apparently, the minister is willing to have a private meeting, and Vaden is feeling confident.
So that's good news. Very good news.
So for him to agree to a meeting, that's huge.
If he can hear from me and not grant a visa, I'll be shocked.
Yeah, I agree.
Vaden is called in for the meeting.
Okay, see ya.
Bye, I love you.
Can we stop filming?
The meeting lasted just 3 minutes.
When the immigration minister's people came and said that they were going to sit down with you, you actually believed that maybe this was going to happen?
Oh, yeah. The words out of my mouth, that's a visa right there. I said those words. I thought he was going to actually listen. I bet you if you quizzed him now, I bet you he couldn't tell you 10 words that I said. He wasn't even there. He was there, his face was there, but he wasn't listening to me.
You came down here with hopes of getting the ear of the immigration minister. You did for a short time, but you're not leaving with any optimism.
No, I'm not. 10 seconds in, I realized he's just exactly another empty suit talking head.
Over the next 75 years, Canada shall be the star towards which all who love progress and freedom shall come.
W5 requested an interview with the immigration minister, but after 2 weeks of waiting, we received this response. The minister is aware of the court's decision, and as the matter is currently under review, it would not be appropriate for the minister or IRCC to comment on a specific case due to Canada's privacy laws.
The future of Canada hinges on immigration.
Today, the minister is speaking before the prestigious Canadian Club Toronto.
And I want to underline that our government will always be a leader when it comes to reuniting families.
We approached him about Widlene's case after his speech.
The federal court has issued a scathing condemnation of your ministry when it comes to the case of Widlene Earle. What do you make of the comments that they made in their ruling?
Well, first I would say it was good to meet with Mr. Earle face to face. I know that he traveled quite a distance to come and see me, and was happy that we were able to set aside some time. I know that he's been advocating for this case. We have a court decision. We have to let due process unfold as it will.
You talked about reuniting families in this meeting today. You have the opportunity with the stroke of your signature to issue a TRP to Widlene Earle. Will you?
There is a process that has to be followed, and part of that process is that there is a court decision which has remitted the matter back to an immigration officer with a delegated authority to take a look at the case, being guided by the principles in the court decision.
So you do have the power to issue a TRP now on humanitarian grounds. Why has that not happened?
Because, as I said, now on a couple of occasions, there is a process that has to be followed.
But the TRP doesn't require that you follow that process.
As I said, there is a process that has to be followed, and we don't circumvent those steps, okay? Thank you very much.
But the process has already gone on for more than a decade, and the government does circumvent those steps. About 10,000 TRPs are issued every year. For cases like this 13-year-old baseball player who was born in the United States to Mexican parents. He was granted a TRP by the immigration minister on humanitarian and compassionate grounds so he could leave the country to play a baseball game. For Crystal, it just doesn't add up.
I have a strong disappointment in my own government.
You feel abandoned?
Yeah, I do. Like, I really do. I feel abandoned, and I feel disregarded.
What happens now? Are you going to keep fighting this?
Of course, we have to keep fighting. We've got the truth on our side, we've got a federal court ruling on our side, and we've got the moral high ground on our side.
Widlene is used to disappointments and delays. And yet still, she clings to a dream of life in Canada.
That dream looks like me laying in the snow and making snow angels and throwing snowballs at my dad. It makes me feel like I'm safe and I don't have to worry about anything. I always tell myself that you have to have hope, but if you don't have hope, nothing is gonna come true.
So what happens next? Well, without the minister's intervention, Widlene's file goes back into the hands of an immigration case officer based in Mexico. And there's no deadline for that officer to make a final decision. We'll be right back.